Hi, welcome to Angel's Nook, where anything can become a canvas for creativity. Furniture is just the beginning. Be prepared to be inspired by a wide range of projects and finishing techniques. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of the new videos. As you watch how these pumpkins are finished and redone from where they started as ceramic, plastic, paper-mâché, I want you to keep in mind that these are finishes that you can put on anything. It's not limited to redoing these pumpkins. You can use it on a tabletop, a complete piece of furniture. The way in which I blend these oil-based stains and I layer them can be used on virtually anything. On this particular one, which was ceramic, you can see that it is a very matte finish on it because it soaked into the ceramic. The raw ceramic absorbed it. But I absolutely love the way the finish came out. And layering it, now it looks like it could have been a whole chunk of wood that has been carved into this piece. This paper-mâché that I added the polyurethane to the leaves and the veining, it's going at a really nice contrast. This is satin polyurethane. It comes out more shiny on this paper simply because of the product that it was put over. But the contrast of it is very nice, and you can see the staining effect over the paper-mâché. This one was also ceramic, and I added this is one of the ones that I added polyurethane over the stain. I really like the contrast between this and this. It may be really hard to see on the camera, but this up close looks like a beautiful dark piece of walnut and looks like a very, very natural grain. And I'm really picky about that on things. I don't like a fake looking grain on anything. But this works with the layering to create a finish like this. And these were just very plain cream ceramic, raw ceramic when they started. And also giving that contrast on there separates the stem and the base to give you more look to it. This one is the one that was bright orange with black lines, which was perfectly fine for a Halloween type decor. But now it's something that can go anywhere, anytime. This one is also a ceramic, and on these there is, I haven't put them back in yet, but these will also light up. This is a different way of finishing the ceramic. On this one, I added off camera a little bit of the antique white because I wanted it to look like a little bit more drier aged look of wood, leaning a little bit more toward driftwood. So if you look at each of these, the close-ups of them will show you it's got a very nice natural look to it. By adding more stain in different areas on this, I was able to get darker and lighter areas with it by starting with the walnut and then adding the espresso over it. So it's one of those things to think about. There are so many options with the stain products. You can change decor like I did with this, but you can also use it on your furniture, your cabinet doors. You're not limited to just putting one color of stain on and going, well, that's it, that's all I can do with it. So I hope this inspires you to think of more ways to use the stains, and also inspires you to think about, I can make a high-end piece of decor for my home from something I may have bought very inexpensively on clearance. I have 4 different HTP stains out. I have the tobacco, I have Espresso, which is a really dark coffee brown. I have Toasted Oak, and I have Camel. I've had Camel for a very long time. It has a yellow undertone to it that I've never quite found a use for, so it's been sitting on my shelf. So I'm going to give it a try today and see what happens. But some of the things when I'm working with stain that I have handy. This red solo cup is filled to about right here with mineral spirits, so that as I finish using a chip brush or stain brush, I can go ahead and drop it in there. It also allows me, if I need to change color with the brush or I want to use that color again, I can dry that brush off from the mineral spirits and start using it again. I also have a small ceramic bowl here. As long as you use glass or ceramic, or even if you want to use a plastic throwaway, don't use a paper plate, it'll go right through it. But I have that handy in case I want to blend the stain more than the brushes are letting me do. I have chip brushes, I have the HTP stain brush. I'm not quite sure how it's going to take on this. And this particular one, especially with it starting orange and I want to go to a wood tone, I'm not sure what levels I'm going to have to go with it. But by being able to dip my brush into some of the mineral spirits and do some blending like I did on a tabletop in another video, it works like water works working with the antiquing gels. But obviously this is oil-based. You cannot use water to blend this, so I need the mineral spirits. So we're going to see what happens with this. All the stains have been blended and stirred off camera. I also have both pyramids and solo cups to set these particular things on as I finish them. They have been deglossed off camera, so they are ready to go. And these are things that the wipes are perfect for. And this is also an example of the wipes are not necessarily going to dull the finish. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And that doesn't determine whether or not it effectively deglossed. If it squeaks when you're rubbing your fingers across it or a cabinet or whatever, it's clean, it's ready to go, whether the finish looks like it changed or not. So we're going to give this a try. If I don't like how it's looking, I'm just going to take it off, wipe it off with a paper towel, and try with something different on here. And I always, when I'm doing something like this, I'm going to, it's hard to get everything in camera line for you guys. So, I always am tapping my brush to blend the stain into it and to get most of it back off. So we're going to see what this does as the first coat on this. And it looks like I may need more on it. Working with the oil base, it is not something that I can do the bottom later, which is why I have this propped up so that I can get all the way to the bottom of what shows when it's sitting out and complete. and I needed to put that on heavier than I expected to get part of the look I want. So what I think I'm going to try on top of this is I'm going to try some tobacco and see how that blends in, if it'll give a little bit of striation to this. And I'm going to use a smaller, narrower brush to do that. My hand is going multiple times because I want to make sure that I only hit this lightly. When you see me going back, it's because I can see where striations are not following the wedges of the pumpkin. That needs to dry, and then I think it may need a glaze of tobacco once it's done. I'm going to try now the Camel over the unglazed ceramic, see what that looks like, and add the tobacco over it as well. The ceramic, like I thought it would, is going to drink in the base coat of whatever color you use. Once there's very little stain left on your brush, that's when you can keep blending to create the look that you want. And I'm using a pretty firm stroke on this, but you notice I'm not going this way to fill it all. I'm remaining always going the direction that I want faux grain to show up. I have never been a huge fan of Camel, but I am really liking the tone that these two brushed together are creating. It's a really nice neutral brown that is different than the neutral brown of tobacco by itself. I very much like how that looks. So this is going to sit, I'm going to double check it. Nope, there's a spot right there that I almost missed. And it is not a spot you can fix later. Go. One of the things you can do when you're working on small projects like this, because I didn't put much stain in my brush, I can actually take a paper towel, get most of it off. Sorry. And it's dry enough that now when I dip into, this one is toasted oak, it's not going to change the color of the toasted oak. And since I know I'm going over the ceramic again, I know this first layer is going to go on more like solid coat, but I'm going to have to make the effort to not get it completely solid. Let's see if that will give us some added texture, which it should. Down here on the bottom, they left a really rough edge on this. I'm not using the stain brush because it would give me a solid full coat, which is not what I want at this point. it's going to do the best job for me when I want to put a thin glaze over any of these. I'm using what's left of the stain just to give a brown tone to these white spots. I'm not trying to fill in all the color. I'm going to come back over this now with some of the tobacco. And start it more as a dry brush. This is definitely where you do not want to use a lot of product. You don't want your brush filled with stain. If you do, it's just going to go on like a coat of paint and you will never get the striations. Become looking more like a piece of solid wood, and everywhere that I left those light spaces, they are helping to create that tonal change to give you the effect of this looking like a piece of wood versus a piece of ceramic. You can see as I keep pulling that, and in this case I'm using my brush this way because I can actually get a little bit harder hit with it going that direction. The pouncing is to get it into imperfections in this ceramic. Pouncing to get into the very edge of that stem. I need it to be able to hold on to the stem. which is why I did not add the toasted oak to it to start with. That one dry. I'm not at all sure how the stain is going to do over the paper-mâché, which is what this is, but we're going to find out. And the first layer I want to put on this, I actually want it a little bit thinner. So I'm going to use the stain brush, but I also want to get some mineral spirits into it. So I dipped my brush into the mineral spirits and then onto the plate, and now I'm pouncing some walnut. But this way, it's letting it go on almost like a glaze. And it's the texture that you're seeing on there is the texture of the paper-mâché. It's not that I'm dry brushing. I've got a fair amount into this, but it's very thin, very wet. I'd estimate that by how I'm putting it on here, it's about a 50-50 of mineral spirits and the gel stain. This other one to let you see how much this has changed what this looks like. And for the texture that I add on this one, I'm going to use espresso. And again, I'll do this stem the very last because I've got to be able to handle this, hold it, and move it. And I'm definitely going to be dry brushing down with the espresso. So I've knocked it into my bristles. I see two right here that want to come out. So get rid of those before I start. And the brushes were they've been used a lot, but I knock them back and forth in my hand before we ever start. not concerned about the whole bottom of this, but I want to make sure that anything that will show while it's sitting has finish on it. And I'll go back and use the stain brush with the thinned. That's a little bit heavier right there than I want. Wipe it back a little bit and then do a very light dry brush on it. And that is definitely different than what it started out looking like. I'm going to try the same process on this one and see what it does over the white, or actually the cream on this. This one is definitely going to need a final glaze of just a thin coat of stain over this after it dries, but it's going to need to dry for 24 to 48 hours before I do that, so that when I put the thin glaze over it, because I will thin it with mineral spirits again, if I did that right now, it would blend out. The mineral spirits would take away all of the faux wood effect that has been created on this. So now this one's going to sit over here to dry. And I'm going to try toasted oak as the base color. And I'm going to try walnut over it instead of what I normally use, which is tobacco. So we'll see how this goes. So again, I'm going to use the walnut thinned a little bit, but I need to get the toasted oak on first. I'm going backward on this. So toasted oak is not thinned. It's just being put on with very little on the brush. Now I'm going to see what it does with some thinned walnut. This is actually a very pretty color with the toasted oak and the walnut blended together. This one, I will wait until it dries to decide whether or not it needs a glaze on it as well. This is just double checking that I don't have any odd lines going in a weird direction, but it shouldn't be going down this. This one dry. This is the last ceramic one, and I really think I want the walnut to be the base color on it. I'm going to try layering several stains with dry brush on this to see what it does. And hopefully it will work. Good thing that's getting stained too. Is it working? And a little bit of toasted oak into that. And then a little bit of espresso. Espresso on the stem. This one definitely will get an additional coat of something, whether it's just polyurethane or it's a thin glaze of a thin glaze of walnut over it. This is walnut going on. That has been thinned. I honestly like how just the walnut did on this, so I think that's where that's going to stay. And I'll see what dry brushing these leaves does, because I can always remove them if I do not like them. There is some line forming in this, which is why I'm pulling the stain in the direction that veins would go. It's going to be next to impossible to get the lines that are showing here to show up in pictures, but they are definitely there. And this is the walnut that is thinned with mineral spirits. Straight walnut would not create any striations in this. I don't want to completely cover twine that's on there. And this one looks like it's ready to dry. Just want to make sure I don't have any pools anywhere, because those would look very unnatural. This is espresso. It is a super dark brown that is almost black. And I will try to hit the underneath of this just a little bit with it because these little ones tend to roll around. This is toasted oak, but it's pulling a little bit of the walnut out of the brush. just a little bit of tobacco over this. Last strokes using a corner on something this small to make sure that the striations are of the faux grain are going out following the direction they should and not going across anywhere. Muting this down because it's so plasticky. Taking just a little bit of the espresso to bring back out the stem. Being careful not to get down on the neck of anything else. Okay, we'll let these dry overnight and see what they look like tomorrow. And if they're dry enough to do anything else too yet. This one you should be able to see that there are grain lines over this. This was one of the ceramic ones. But what I want to do on this half of this is I want to see if I can get some lighter grain look on it. And I think the Camel is going to do it for me. I don't want it really heavy. But I want to see if I can lighten an area of this. And also take care of part of what is down here. It's a slow process because once you put it on, it's harder to get it blended back. Hopefully you can see that there is darker over here, there is lighter over here. So it's almost like a piece of wood that you're seeing light and dark in the whole piece, which you often see in something that has been carved, because they want that look in it. They want the grain of the wood to add to it. And since I want it to be almost half, I need to add a little bit more on the back here. And tapering it down here on the front. So it's kind of going at an angle like grain sometimes does. And I'm going to let that dry. One of the things that polyurethane can do as a top coat is bring out elements of grain in a piece of wood or a piece of furniture that you're working on that you don't see when it's in a low luster or almost matte finish on it. So this particular pumpkin, I want to add the polyurethane to see if it brings out the darks and lights on this better. I don't want it on all of the pieces. The other pieces I'm really happy with, and up close I really like this piece too. But I think the polyurethane will add to it. And if this were on a tabletop, it would be the same thing could happen with it. Bringing a richness to the surface that it doesn't have when it's in a matte surface. I happen to have a piece of the True Applicator, which works really well, especially on small pieces like this, to apply a top coat and have absolutely no brush marks on it. If you look at this, and then you look at this where it's not got the added sheen, and this will come down. This is a satin. It will not dry as shiny as this, but it's very clear here that adding that has made this look even more like it's a natural wood that has had a finish placed on it. Pardon me. Between the allergens outside and the smell of this top coat, it got me. And I'm not putting very much top coat on the True Applicator. You don't want to pounce, you don't want to put bubbles into this. With the top coat, you want to do as little movement on it as possible. And debating on whether I want the top of that to have a finish on it, and I think yes. I don't know, I'm gonna step back from it. Oh no, when I step back from it, it needs to be matte on the stem. So this needs to dry, and we'll do some close-ups on it after it's dried to let you see the effect that that has as far as the richness of the faux wood on this. With this particular pumpkin and its leaves, it's pretty obvious these are not wood, but they're in a wood tone right now. So what I want to do with this is I'm going to take a Sharpie that's got a really good fine point on it. It's a pretty new one. And what I want to do is I'm going to freehand down through this to create some veining. And I'm going to bring some edging back just along the edges of the leaf, as though they're the type of leaf that has a little bit of raggedness to it, because an actual pumpkin and squash leaf actually has that to it. And it's also giving these just a little bit more texture. If you look at the two of them right now, the one that has nothing done to it and the one that has veining, the veining adds to it. You definitely would not want to do that with black. Black would be too stark. And veins are not perfect lines in things. They just kind of meander like streams. If you're not familiar with how they go, get yourself a picture and use that to help you see where the veining would go and how extensive it would be. Again, I'm going to go back to these edges. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some more contrast between the main pumpkin and the leaves by adding polyurethane to the top side of the leaves. And I'm going to do the leaf that I did first to give that one chance to dry a little bit longer. Permanent ink usually doesn't smear, but sometimes it can. And I'm keeping this lifted up on my fingers so that I'm not putting it down on the pumpkin, because I don't want it on the pumpkin. I want a sheen contrast, not a match. And it's not dry yet, so it'll be less of a sheen, but you can see the difference between what it looks like against the pumpkin as opposed to just the dry one. And you don't want much polyurethane on here. You don't want it to puddle off. You don't want it to saturate this leaf. You just want to cover it. That's already gotten some on there, so you know what? That stem's going to get, the top of it's going to get some sheen. So now this will dry. And once it's dry, it should be just a nice soft glow against the very matte finish of the pumpkin itself. These two pumpkins, I want to do a glaze of tobacco over. And to do that, I'm dipping my brush into some mineral oil and then tapping back onto the plate so that I'm going to be able to get a really, really thin coat on this. It's a little bit runny, but not terribly. It would be a very slow run, but it's got this much thinner. And I may have to change off and use the stain brush, I'm not sure. Look and see what the stain brush does if I take it over it. Yep, for this coat, the stain brush is going to be better. But you don't know until you try, as far as which way is going to give you the coat that you want. Adding this thin light coat is softening all those faux grain lines. To give them a much more natural look. And when you do a layer with mineral spirits, you cannot keep working it because the mineral spirits will start to activate the lower layer of stain that is not cured yet. So you have to work quickly and then stop. I'm going to add the layer of that over this as well. I'm dipping back into the mineral spirits with the stain brush because I need to disperse some of this that's on the plate. And I'm going to pick up just a little bit more tobacco. Yep, that's doing a better coat of what I want. It's still thinned, but it's coating better. This is what can happen on a piece of furniture as well. That adding one more layer can make it all come together. Just like doing some of the faux countertops, if you skip the white wash layer, your stone doesn't look as natural. But if you add that layer, you get a very natural looking finish. And that has very much blended in and softened the look of that finish. This one I want a thinner glaze, I think. So I have, yes I do. So I thinned that down. You should be able to see. I can move this without getting it into something that's going to mark it up. This was a lighter finish, but now glazing it thinner is also keeping the lighter finish. But blending everything together. So, that one is blended out. This one, I'm going to try adding just a little bit of the antique white to it. Did not dip back in to get any more of this color. Because I want to be able to keep blending. And at this point, when you're blending, you are not using a soft touch with the brush. You are pulling it very firmly across, because you're not only blending what you have on here, you are picking up a little bit of the residue of paint that's deep in the bristles. And that has also softened and blended all the lines on that piece.